I used to believe my restaurant, the corner café, was the single best thing in my life. It wasn't fancy, just a small, comfortable spot where I cooked honest, good food using my grandmother's recipes. I had spent 5 years working 18-hour days to make that cafe the heart of our small town. I knew every customer by name, and I loved the smell of coffee and frying bacon that woke me up every morning. I had a dream, to eventually buy the whole building and make the corner cafe a permanent fixture. That dream shattered one sunny Tuesday afternoon when Mr. Stone walked in. Mr. Stone was the owner of the building, a cold, arrogant man who saw money where I saw community. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my annual rent, and he carried a stiff, white envelope that felt like a death sentence. He didn't order coffee. He just walked straight up to my counter, looking at my freshly baked cinnamon rolls with an expression of disgust. This was the moment that became the ultimate worst day of my life. "Here, Jake," Mr. Stone said, sliding the envelope across the counter. His voice was condescending, looking down at my apron. "Consider this your notice. I'm not renewing your lease next month." My hands, which were busy wiping down the stainless steel, froze instantly. "What? Why, Mr. Stone? The cafe is doing great. I always pay the rent on time, and my business is strong. I've been here 5 years. Mr. Stone sighed dramatically, checking the expensive watch on his wrist. "Strong? Jake, you're running a glorified soup kitchen. Look around. This prime corner needs a real business, something professional, something with scale. I've signed a 10-year deal with a major national franchise. They pay 3 times what you pay." He looked at my apron again. "You're a good cook, Jake, but you're not a businessman. You're not good enough to own a prime piece of property like this. You're a failure. Pack up your recipes and go find a job washing dishes somewhere else." Those words, "you're a failure and you're not good enough," cut deep in the eviction notice itself. They stripped away my pride, my dream, and my sense of self-worth. I stood there speechless, watching my life's work being tossed aside for corporate greed. Mr. Stone turned to leave, tossing one last insult over his shoulder. "I'm putting in a Burger Palace franchise. Now that's a real business model. Don't worry, the eviction is final. I don't want to see your little cafe here past the end of the month." I spent the next 2 weeks dismantling the corner cafe. Every time I took down a photo, unplugged an old appliance, or wiped the dust off a chair, I remembered Mr. Stone's sneering face. My customers were heartbroken, but they couldn't stop the inevitable. When I finally locked the door for the last time, I slumped onto the curb. I had lost my business, my future, and my entire sense of direction. I was truly at rock bottom. I looked at the dark windows of the empty cafe and swore that Mr. Stone would regret that day. The eviction was the worst day of my life, but it was also the catalyst I desperately needed. I couldn't stay in that town, watching Mr. Stone turn my beloved cafe into a bland, corporate fast food joint. I took the small amount of savings I had left, packed my old truck, and drove away without saying goodbye to anyone, not even my closest friends. I drove until the despair lifted just enough for me to think clearly. I realized that Mr. Stone was right about one thing. My business lacked scale. I had put all my dreams into one fragile location. I landed in a different, much larger city. I couldn't afford a new restaurant, so I started small. I bought a used food truck, painted it bright red, and called it Jake's Gourmet Grab. I took my grandmother's best recipes, the savory pot pies, the rich soups, the amazing cinnamon rolls, and focused on making them fast and portable. The hours were brutal. I cooked, served, and cleaned every day until I collapsed. But this time, I wasn't just working for rent. I was working for revenge. Success didn't happen overnight, but my food was genuinely good. People lined up around the block for my pot pies. Journalists wrote articles about my amazing gourmet food truck. I didn't spend the money I earned. I saved every penny. I bought a second truck, hired staff, and standardized my recipes. My business model was the opposite of the corner cafe. It was decentralized, adaptable, and highly profitable. I was meticulous about efficiency and cost control. I turned the insults Mr. Stone had hurled at me, not a businessman, not good enough, into the fuel that drove my entire operation. Within a year and a half, I had 6 successful food trucks, a booming catering business, and distribution deals with several small grocery chains for my frozen pot pies. I was making more money in a week than I had made in a year at the café. I was a secret millionaire, but no one outside my small, loyal management team knew it. I maintained my low profile, driving the same old truck and wearing the same simple apron. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted quiet power. All that time, every decision I made, every dollar I saved, had one ultimate goal, the ultimate revenge. I tracked the news in my old hometown like a hawk. I was waiting for the perfect moment to return and settle the score with Mr. Stone. I knew he had put in the Burger Palace, the real business model that he thought was superior to my cafe. Burger Palace was exactly the kind of bland, corporate nonsense that struggled in small, tight-knit communities. I knew the franchise was expensive to run, and the rent Mr. Stone was charging was astronomical. I waited for 2 years. Then, the perfect piece of information landed in my inbox. A commercial real estate bulletin popped up with a listing for the corner building, prime location, excellent investment opportunity. Mr. Stone was selling the entire building. I felt a surge of pure triumph, so strong it made me weak. Mr. Stone was struggling. He had driven out a steady, reliable tenant me for a huge payoff Burger Palace, but the franchise must have failed to meet his expectations or, more likely, failed to pay the outrageous rent he demanded. Now, he needed a quick sale. I immediately called my commercial lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Chun who handled all my national contracts. I told her the entire story, the betrayal, the humiliation, and the long game I had been playing. Ms. Chun, I said, my voice steady, I want you to buy that building. I want you to use a blind shell corporation. Mr. Stone must not, under any circumstances, know who the buyer is until the papers are signed and the deal is closed. I want the total, complete victory. Ms. Chun loved the idea. She said the price Stone was asking was surprisingly low, meaning he was desperate and worried about the failing franchise tenant currently occupying the space. The negotiation process took 6 agonizing weeks. I spent every day glued to my phone, tracking the legal maneuvers. Ms. Chun was brilliant. She created an airtight shell company named Phoenix Holdings, LLC, making it look like a large, anonymous investment firm from a distant state. Mr. Stone, desperate for the cash, never questioned the name or the lack of personal contact. I learned that the Burger Palace was indeed failing badly. They were behind on rent, and the manager was constantly complaining about the high cost of maintenance. The corporate chain was likely going to pull out soon, leaving Mr. Stone with an empty, expensive building. His greed had backfired spectacularly. The final closing date was set for a Friday afternoon. Ms. Chun called me that morning. It's done, Jake. Phoenix Holdings owns the building. You are officially the landlord. I felt a quiet, absolute sense of victory. The worst day of my life had just been reversed. I was going back to the corner. I drove my old red truck back to my hometown that afternoon. I didn't update the look of the truck. I wanted to arrive looking exactly like the man Mr. Stone had dismissed 2 years ago. I wore my same faded jeans and a simple, clean work shirt. I drove slowly down Main Street. The corner cafe building looked different now. The classic brick facade was covered in cheap, bright plastic signs advertising Burger Palace, flame-grilled. It looked cheap, sterile, and entirely out of place. My heart ached for the beautiful little cafe that used to be there, but the anger was stronger. I parked around the corner and walked toward the building. I walked right past the Burger Palace windows. The restaurant inside was sad and empty. A bored teenage worker was wiping down a table, and the manager looked stressed. It was a complete disaster compared to the bustling, welcoming cafe I used to run. I pulled out my phone and called Ms. Chun. Arrange a meeting for me immediately. I instructed. I want to terminate the lease of the Burger Palace manager. And I want Mr. Stone there. Tell him the new owner of Phoenix Holdings wants to discuss the property. Ms. Chun was quick. The meeting was set for the following morning at 10 a.m. in a small, empty office space located on the second floor of the building, the very office where Mr. Stone usually conducted his business. That night, I didn't stay in a fancy hotel. I parked my old truck in a quiet spot and slept in the back, just like I did when I started Jake's Gourmet Grab. I wanted to remember the struggle. I wanted to arrive at the meeting feeling grounded, not arrogant. The next morning, I arrived at the building at 9:45 a.m. I walked through the side door, climbed the old wooden stairs, and found the office. The air smelled of old carpet and faint fryer grease from a failing Burger Palace downstairs. I walked into the office. The Burger Palace manager was already there, looking terrified. Mr. Stone was sitting behind the desk, looking frustrated and defensive. He was wearing the same expensive suit, but it looked rumpled and his face was drawn with worry. Mr. Stone looked up as I walked in, then immediately frowned. He didn't recognize me at first. I had lost weight and gained confidence, but the features were the same. "Excuse me," Mr. Stone snapped, adjusting his tie. "This is a private meeting with the new owner of the building and the tenant manager. I don't recall asking for a handyman." I didn't say a word. I walked to the desk, placed my hands flat on the polished wood, and just stared at him. Mr. Stone's eyes narrowed. He looked at my face, then down at my simple work boots, then back up at my eyes. The recognition started to dawn on him, slowly, painfully. His eyes widened, and the color instantly drained from his face. "Jake?" he whispered, disbelief warring with sudden, total fear. What are you doing here?" "I thought you left town." "I did leave town, Mr. Stone," I said, my voice calm, cold and steady. "But I came back. I came back for my café." The Burger Palace manager, sitting beside him, looked back and forth between us, utterly confused. "I don't understand," Mr. Stone stammered, pulling himself up from the chair. He put on a false air of superiority. "You can't be here. This is my property. It was my property. This is a private business matter. You're trespassing." I reached into my simple shirt pocket and pulled out a single sheet of crisp, official paper. I laid it on the desk between us. It was a deed to the building, showing the transfer to Phoenix Holdings, LLC, signed by Mr. Stone himself just yesterday. "I'm not trespassing, Mr. Stone," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "I'm the landlord. I'm the owner of the building. Phoenix Holdings is me." The silence that followed was absolute. Mr. Stone stared at the document, then at my face, then back at the name of the shell company. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a devastating, total realization of his own ruin. The Burger Palace manager was completely lost. "Wait, who is the owner? What about Phoenix Holdings?" I looked at the manager. "My name is Jake. I used to run the corner cafe here. Your lease is terminated, effective immediately. You have 30 days to clear out your equipment and fixtures." The manager looked distraught. "Terminated? But where will we go? We just signed a 10-year deal with Mr. Stone." "You signed a 10-year deal with a man who sold the building yesterday without telling you." I corrected. "And your lease had a clause allowing termination upon sale of the building." Mr. Stone was so desperate for cash, he didn't care about your business. He just cared about the closing funds. Mr. Stone was reeling, leaning heavily against the desk. He finally found his voice, high and panicked. "This isn't fair, Jake. You set me up. You can't do this. I was waiting for that money." "Fair?" I asked, leaning closer, my eyes never leaving his. "Fair was 5 years ago, Mr. Stone, when I paid the rent on time and loved this community. Fair was me working 18 hours a day to build an honest business. You walked in here and told me I was a failure. You told me I wasn't good enough to own a real business." I pointed to the deed. "This isn't about fair, Mr. Stone. This is about business. This is about competence. You failed. Your real business model failed, and your greed made you blind enough to sell your most valuable asset to the very man you mocked." Mr. Stone looked around the room, the walls closing in on him. He realized that every insult he had ever thrown at me had become the fuel for my ultimate success. My worst day had become my greatest victory. The Burger Palace manager quickly gathered his papers and slipped out of the office, eager to escape the shocking confrontation. That left just me and the defeated Mr. Stone. "How did you get the money, Jake?" Mr. Stone demanded, his voice still shaking with disbelief. You ran a little cafe. You were broke. You kicked me out, Mr. Stone. I reminded him. You forced me to go out and learn how to run a real business. I took my grandmother's simple recipes and built a national brand of gourmet food trucks and products. You taught me the value of scale, and I learned my lesson. I am a millionaire many times over now. I picked up the deed from the desk, folding it neatly. You thought you were dealing with a naive cook. You were dealing with a businessman who understands opportunity. When you listed this building, I saw my opportunity to finally reclaim my dream and settle a debt of honor. Mr. Stone sank back into the chair, covering his face with his hands. He was ruined, his reputation destroyed, and his prime property was now owned by the man he had called a failure. I left the office and walked down the old wooden stairs. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a quiet, profound sense of closure. The revenge wasn't in his ruin. The revenge was in my success. I had proved him wrong about my capability, and I had reclaimed the place he took from me. I walked straight across the street to the old hardware store. The owner, a friend named Tom, had often drunk coffee at the corner cafe. He saw me and his eyes lit up. "Jake, you're back. What are you doing here? And what's going on at the old cafe?" "That burger palace is a disaster." "I'm here to fix the disaster, Tom," I said, smiling genuinely. "I need some paint, lumber, and a lot of cleaning supplies. I need to gut the burger palace entirely. I just bought the building." Tom's jaw dropped. The news spread to the town like wildfire. The next few weeks were a blur of construction and happy exhaustion. I hired a local team and immediately started tearing down the cheap plastic facade of the Burger Palace. The whole town came out to watch the destruction of the corporate chain that had failed to honor the community. I restored the original brickwork and rebuilt the interior based on the cozy, welcoming atmosphere of the old cafe. But this time, it was bigger and better. I called it Jake's Corner, a tribute to the memory of the original place and the new beginning. My old customers came by every day, cheering me on, bringing me coffee, and sharing their excitement. The whole community was rallying around the return of the beloved local business. They had hated the bland Burger Palace and were thrilled to see local success return. The renovation was more than just a repair job. It was an act of healing. Every nail driven, every wall painted, was a step away from the pain of eviction and toward the future I had earned. I made sure every detail honored the original cafe, from the custom counter to the old wooden tables. The money I used to fund the renovation was entirely my own, earned through hard work, smart business decisions, and the painful lessons Mr. Stone had inadvertently taught me. Mr. Stone? He disappeared from town. I heard he was forced to sell his luxury car and move into a smaller apartment after the financial fallout from his failed investments and the loss of the building. His greed had cost him everything. The official opening day of Jake's Corner was a true culmination of my victory. The line stretched down the block, and the atmosphere was festive and electric. My old customers rushed in, delighted to see the return of their favorite coffee and cinnamon rolls. I stood behind the counter, wearing a new, clean white apron, greeting everyone with a smile. I wasn't just a cook anymore. I was the owner, the landlord, and a successful entrepreneur. I looked around the packed restaurant, breathing in the comforting smell of coffee and baked goods. The revenge wasn't in Mr. Stone's failure. The revenge was in the thriving business that proved his harsh words wrong. I was good enough. I was more than good enough. A reporter from a city newspaper showed up, intrigued by the story of the quick opening and the dramatic reversal of fortune. I gave him a short, careful interview, focusing on the quality of the food and the importance of community. I didn't mention Mr. Stone by name, but I did share the core message of my journey. 2 years ago, I was told I wasn't good enough to own a prime business, I told the reporter. But that failure forced me to go out and build something bigger and stronger. The best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. The article ran the next day, and the story became an immediate sensation. It was a story of the underdog triumphing over corporate arrogance, a story everyone could understand and cheer for. The success of Jake's Corner wasn't just local. It became the flagship for my entire national brand. I used the space to test new recipes and train new staff for my food truck and retail lines. The physical location, the place Mr. Stone said needed a real business, became the center of my growing empire. I received a final, desperate letter from Mr. Stone's lawyer, trying to challenge the sale and claiming I had defrauded him. Ms. Chen quickly shut it down. The sale was legal, the shell company was perfectly executed, and Mr. Stone had signed the papers willingly. He had no case. The realization that I had defeated him not with anger, but with superior business acumen, was the sweetest part of the whole journey. I often stood by the front window, looking out at the street. I remembered sitting on the curb 2 years earlier, feeling utterly defeated, watching the Burger Palace signs go up. That painful memory was now a marker of how far I had come. The worst day of my life had indeed been the ultimate revenge. Being kicked out forced me to expand my vision, sharpen my skills, and build a fortress of financial independence. If Mr. Stone had been kind, if he had let me stay, I would have happily remained a small-town cafe owner, never realizing my true potential. His arrogance was a gift. His greed was the launch pad. I made sure that Jake's Corner continued to embody the values that Mr. Stone hated. We hired local people, sourced local ingredients, and gave discounts to the elderly in the neighborhood. We were the complete opposite of the cold, profit-driven machine that the Burger Palace represented. I looked at the people walking in and out of the door, happy customers, laughing with my staff. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol of resilience. I decided to help other small business owners, too. I started buying up commercial properties in other parts of the city, working directly with local entrepreneurs, offering fair rents and stability. I became the kind of landlord I wished I had had. My final act of reclaiming the building was symbolic. I had the old wooden stairs leading to the upstairs office polished and restored. I took the small office space, the one where Mr. Stone had humiliated me, and turned it into the corporate headquarters for my national brand, Phoenix Holdings, LLC. I installed a large, beautiful plaque outside the door, but it didn't mention my success. It simply read, "Founded on the belief that everyone is good enough." I had turned the place of my greatest shame into the center of my greatest triumph. The blueprint for turning rock bottom into victory was complete. I stood in the corner of the busy restaurant, watching the morning rush. The noise was loud, the smell was amazing, and the energy was infectious. I was back where I belonged, but I was fundamentally changed. I was no longer the naive cook who ran a small cafe. I was the architect of his own destiny, and the owner of the whole building. The revenge wasn't loud or angry. It was quiet, powerful, and permanent. The best feeling was knowing that Mr. Stone was forced to face the truth every day. The failure he dismissed had come back to buy everything he valued.